Hi there, it's Chris Scullion again from TiredOldHack.com. This is the fourth of my VHS preservation tapes. This is an interesting one. This is one that I probably watched more than any other tape back in the day, which may go some way to explaining why it's slightly poorer quality than the other tapes I've got in my collection, because I wore the hell out of this one essentially, so apologies if it's slightly poorer quality than the rest. If anyone has a better condition version of this that they'd like to donate, please do get in touch and I'll happily re-upload. But for now, here's what we've got. This is a video that was released free with N64 Magazine in the UK. This particular issue came out at the end of March 1997. So at this point, the Nintendo 64 had already come out in Japan and had been out for a while. And this is a video taken from the Shoshinkai show, which was essentially Space World, which was Nintendo's own kind of E3 type thing that it used to do back in the day and doesn't really do anymore, sadly. So yeah, this video, this was around about September, October-ish of 1996 when this Japanese kind of portion of the video was made. This is the video that was given to the press at Shoshinkai near the end of 96, at which point the N64 was already out. So this was footage of kind of present and upcoming games for the N64 at the time in Japan. And obviously because the N64 had still to come out, well, it only just come out when this video was released, so like March 97. So to everyone watching this video on the N64 Magazine kind of VHS version, this was all new to them. So yeah, so a lot of these games, the Shoshinkai from the year before, from 95, was a more curious one because that was when N64 was first kind of properly unveiled, and there was loads of games shown during that were kind of cancelled or didn't end up looking like they were supposed to. So at the time, Mario Kart 64 was Mario Kart R and had kind of extra, Magic Koopa was a character in it and stuff like that. And Waverace was a kind of weird game with transforming speedboats, but by this point the N64 was already out in Japan, and so this video has a kind of fewer surprises and kind of hidden gems in it for modern gamers. So a lot of the stuff here did end up like this, but there's still a couple of interesting things I'll point out. A couple of games that didn't make it eventually and were cancelled or were tweaked kind of based on what we know. And because it's the Japanese video, there's obviously some Japan-only games that that are different from, well, they just were never released in the UK. N64 Magazine's got a kind of long-running kind of heritage. It's a British games magazine. It was originally Superplay, so the SNES magazine, which was recently re-released by Retro Gamer magazine. They made a new issue of Superplay. So yeah, it started as Superplay back in the kind of early 90s, and covered Super Nintendo reviews and kind of had a strong focus on import reviews, which made it quite a big deal at the time. And then when the Super Nintendo was replaced with the N64, obviously Superplay as a name didn't make sense anymore, so it kind of evolved into N64 Magazine. And then again, it evolved again into NGC when the GameCube came out. And subsequently then became Nintendo Gamer N Gamer first when the Wii came out, and then became Nintendo Gamer, and I joined Nintendo Gamer right at the end of its life, so I ran its website for the last 10-11 months before it was all kind of shut down. So yeah, that's the kind of, there's like a 20-year lifespan essentially. So N64 was the kind of second stage of what was actually a multiple publication run. Yeah, this is Blast Corps by Rare. Kind of underrated, almost kind of puzzle racing game type thing. There's a big truck with explosions heading towards you and you've got to kind of clear the path for it. It's on Rare Replay if you've got an Xbox One, so it's worth getting, it's really good. So yeah, this tape was given away free with the first issue of N64 Magazine, which was the April 97 issue, but it came out in kind of mid to late March in the shops. And yeah, thank you very much to Future Publishing, because they have very graciously allowed me to kind of upload it. It's obviously there's copyright stuff involved here. N64 Magazine is a Future brand still, even though it doesn't exist anymore. So I had to, if I'd just put this up, I'm sure I would have got kind of letters from Future saying, "Fuck are you doing? This is our tape still." So I got in touch with them and they very graciously allowed me to put their VHS tapes on YouTube for people to see and to preserve them. So that's really, I'm very appreciative of that. So yeah, so you can thank them for being able to see this in this kind of quality because they've given the nod for it. So you can thank them if you've got some spare change by subscribing to one of their magazines at myfavouriteMagazines.co.uk, I believe. The J-League Perfect Striker, which became ISS 64, International Superstar Soccer 64, like one of the best football games ever made. And it didn't come out too much longer after this video came out, so it was kind of issue 2 or 3, I believe. N64 Magazine was when ISS 64 got big coverage, because so this was mere a couple of months away at this point from a UK release. A fantastic game. Introduced the through ball button, which kind of transformed football games. I'll do a proper video, kind of re-review of ISS 64 at some point, because it's a really important football game in the grand scheme of things. This is Wonder Project J2, I think? Yep. Yeah, it's a kind of story-based RPG, never made it to the UK or the US, you'll be stunned to see. Although it looks cool for an N64 game. But yeah, never made it to the West. Neither did Echo nor St Andrews, which is a kind of obviously golf game based on St Andrews Old Course in Scotland, but it's a shame. That could have been a good one and it could have done well in the UK, but yeah, again it was Japan only. Didn't make it outside the East. Same with this one, Chokukan Night Pro Yaku King. It was a baseball game, obviously, with kind of weird big head characters. Again, it only came out in Japan. It had a sequel, but yeah, neither of them made it. You'd have thought maybe in the US, certainly not in the UK, because Japan is a kind of almost a non-event. And you guessed it, Mahjong Master never made it to the West either. Such a kind of Mahjong games are like a massive deal in Japan, but in the West we just got no fucking idea what they are. So we very, very, very rare for a Mahjong game to ever make it to the West, other than kind of Mahjong Solitaire, the kind of Shanghai Solitaire type games. Those always used to get a release for some reason. Here's Shadows of the Empire. I want to do a proper video of this at some point as well, because this is underrated. At the time it came out, it was getting like 60s and 70s, because there's loads of kind of weird glitchy bits, but when you look at it now, it's actually, they did a decent job of making a kind of canon Star Wars story that was kind of ran almost kind of parallel to the main movies. It wasn't just recreating scenes from the main movies, it was a kind of weird side story. There's your Golden Knight. Here's Yoshi's Story when it was still Yoshi's Island 64. It was a decent game. It wasn't as good as Yoshi's Island, obviously, but I think it was fine. Here's your first cancelled game. Kirby's Air Ride was originally Kirby Bowl 64, then renamed Kirby's Air Ride, and was meant to be on the N64, but was then cancelled. It ended up on the GameCube instead. So that footage you just saw there was from a cancelled N64 version. Dual Heroes was shit. It was a terrible fighting game. And here's another cancelled one, Rev Limit. The developer that was working on it, the studio went under, and it never came out. So that was a brief glimpse of Rev Limit, a cancelled racing game. There's Turok. We'll see more of Turok later. This is Ganbare Goemon, which is also kind of mystical. And here's another one, Blade and Barrel, also cancelled. Never made it out. Never made it to release. And during this Zelda Ocarina footage, you can see there really brief glimpses of Earthbound 64, Mother 3, which eventually ended up on Game Boy Advance instead. So it's another cancelled Earthbound game. So you saw, if you kind of watch back, just blinking you'll miss it stuff. While it was showing Zelda, you saw really brief glimpses of Ness from Earthbound kind of walking about. And that was the only kind of footage really of a 3D polygonal version of an Earthbound game. It was cancelled, and after petitions ended up on Game Boy Advance instead as a more traditional kind of RPG. But yeah, there you go. So at this point, this is the second part of the tape, is where they've just said those games in full. Essentially, they've had the Japanese N64, the N64 Magazine guys. So this is all footage they've captured from their. I say Japanese. This is in English. Maybe this is early US or EU footage. Possibly. Either way, at this point, Shoshinkai videos ended, and this is video footage captured by either by the N64 Magazine staff or by someone else who's kind of sent them this footage. So yeah, so to people buying a magazine who didn't have an N64 yet, N64 had been out a matter of weeks by the time this first issue came out, and so this was gonna, to a lot of people, this was mind blowing. It's easy to look back now at Mario 64 and think, yeah, it looks cool, but it's the Beatles effect basically. When a lot of kind of younger people listen to the Beatles music today, they go, yeah, it's good, but I don't see what the big deal is. It's because you had to have been there at the time and experience what at the time was kind of genre defining and kind of something totally unique, and the fact that so many people since kind of imitated it and built on it and used it as the groundwork. When you look back at it now, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't see what the big deal is, but it's because the stuff it invented and innovated was kind of adopted and became commonplace. That's why nowadays it didn't seem. So to a lot of people, a lot of kind of younger gamers, this may look really basic. Or you may look at it and go, I don't see the big deal is. There's loads of 3D platformers that are like this. But that's the point. This was kind of unique at the time. And kind of laid although there'd been some 3D platformers before it, this is one that kind of laid the groundwork and said, no, this is how it should be done. And loads of people kind of copied it from that point on, or were inspired by it. So yeah. I also think it's one of those games that over the years it's aged better than, say, early GameCube stuff. For some reason, some N64 stuff, to be blunt, it hasn't aged very well at all. A lot of games that focused on, you can see the kind of, in this level, like the floors and the walls are really blurry textures, and a lot of games N64 games emphasised they kind of used a lot of those blurry textures, so those ones have aged really badly. But some games like Mario 64, they kind of had the blurry wall textures, but that was kind of it. Like Mario himself and other enemies and stuff were just simple coloured polygons, and those have aged really well actually. It's given a kind of cool retro 3D look, which still looks good today. It's basic, but it's clean, you know what I mean? So N64 games these days are a bit of a mixed bag. Like, you look at old SNES games and NES games, and it's clear that they kind of have that cool retro look, and they still look cool today because it's a crisp sprite-based stuff, whereas N64 games, half of them kind of look a bit muddy and blurry, depending on how much kind of emphasis was placed on blurry textures. Long story short, I'm just saying Mario 64 looks ace, even today. And there you go, 96% it got in N64 Magazine. Here's Pilotwings 64. I think this is more of an example of what I was saying in terms of some games not looking so good. Because it put more emphasis on kind of texture based polygons and environments. So Pilotwings 64 I think doesn't fare so well visually today. It still looks okay, but you can see it's just more kind of murkier environments because they were going for realistic at the time, and realistic N64 games don't really look so great today, whereas stylized ones still do. At the time though, this was just mind-blowing and such a difference between, such an improvement on the SNES Pilotwings, which is already great, but used Mode 7 to kind of create fake 3D environments, whereas this was real 3D environments using polygons, and it was fantastic. This is also one of the reasons the N64 had yellow, the 4 C buttons, so the up, down, left and right, yellow C buttons. Pilotwings is one of the main games behind that. The C buttons are actually camera buttons, so that's what C stood for. Although it was convenient that it was A button, B button, and the C buttons, C actually stood for camera. Those were originally camera buttons, and were designed to you press them to switch between different camera angles, which is why in Mario 64 when you press the C buttons you can switch between a first person view and rotate the camera left and right, and it happens here as well. I think you see it in this there. You can use the camera buttons to rotate the camera and switch to first person view and stuff. So yeah, although later on N64 games used the C buttons just for kind of action buttons, like fighting games and stuff used them, they were originally designed to be camera buttons, because the big deal with N64 was by introducing polygon based graphics, you suddenly had a 3D camera that you could rotate and turn around in games, and that was the whole point, was that the C buttons were meant to be camera buttons originally. And just as games got more complex, they just served other purposes instead. This is the weird kind of Birdman stages that you could unlock by doing certain things. It's just bizarre. It also had a kind of photo mode where you could fly about and just take photos of things. It was a very relaxing game. Except when he crashed and he did a weird kind of scream, which I think happens in this video. Yeah, here we go. Good old Waverace. To this day, Waverace's water still looks pretty decent. This was the thing about Waverace was so earth-shattering at the time that it was the water physics everyone went on about. The fact that for the first time ever in any game you were racing on water and it felt like real water. It kind of bobbed, and as you went on, you kind of bobbed up and down, and there was waves you could race essentially, but as you turned, it wasn't just a straight turn like any kind of racing game. You had to bear the waves in mind, because if you hit a kind of wave as you turned, it might throw you off course and stuff like that. The water just behaved really realistically. Like I said, the year before at the Shishinkai show, Nintendo had showed really early Waverace footage, and it was originally supposed to be you raced kind of ships, like speedboat type things that could transform into kind of Wipeout style cars. Apparently the legend has it that Miyamoto thought it looked too similar to other racing games. I don't know if he had Wipeout in mind or something. He thought it looked too similar to other racing games at the time, and the fact that it was on water wasn't enough to kind of distance it from other futuristic looking racers. So the speedboats were ditched. Transforming speedboats were ditched and replaced with these kind of jet skis instead, which was cool. It also had kind of Kawasaki licensing. I believe it was Kawasaki, which was ditched in favour. This is a kind of really weird thing that people kind of pointed out when they re-released Waverace on Virtual Console on the Wii many years later. Obviously, the sponsorship deals with Kawasaki had run out, so any of the advertising hoardings that you can see with Kawasaki written on them were removed. Like those ones on the left, you can just barely make out. So when they re-released it on the Wii Virtual Console, those advertising hoardings were replaced with advertising hoardings for the Wii, which was really bizarre because this is a game from the mid to late 90s that was now advertising a console that wasn't going to come out for another 10 or more years, which is kind of bizarre. So there's a kind of plus section where they've got kind of brief footage of other games that were kind of further on down the kind of release schedule, or other games that they just maybe didn't have a lot of time to capture footage from or what have you. So it's Killer Instinct Gold, FIFA 64, which is famously one of the worst games in the entire FIFA series. FIFA 64 was atrocious. partly because the shoot button was the same as the slide tackle button, so there's a lot of times where you could hit a shot, and if you kept pressing the shoot button to have a shot, you would accidentally hit a slide tackle after taking a shot, take out the goalie and get sent off. So that was annoying. This Doom 64, this is a really weird game. While other systems had ports of Doom, this is actually a kind of totally unique game. This is essentially a Doom sequel, which was completely different to the other Doom games. This is worth getting if you're a Doom fan and you never played Doom 64. It's worth hunting down because it's a totally different game.
Tonight's matchup,
Bit of Wayne Gretzky.
versus Pittsburgh. Here's the opening face-off.
This is quite fun as well. It's kind of arcadey style racing game. As you can see, the wild shots.
But incredible.
And then finally, the last part of this video, which as you can see is showing its age a bit. They essentially had two long trailers, one for Mission Impossible and N64, and one for Turok Dinosaur Hunter and N64. So rather than kind of cut them up and do stuff with them, they just decided to release these videos in their full. So these are full length kind of trailers for two N64 games. Essentially the earliest N64 game trailers released in the West, so you can enjoy them in their full. Mission Impossible one was a weird one because it had a load of footage from the movie.
Should you or any member of your IM force be caught or killed, the Secretary will disavow all knowledge.
I don't really like the Mission Impossible movie, but it's my personal taste. It was a massive film. The second one I always thought was a much better film.
Simple game. Is he serious?
Always.
It's much worse than you think.
We're being ambushed.
It's quite odd because it's basically the movie trailer. There's very little, if any, video game footage here. This is just a trailer for the film.
They knew we were coming. Do you read me?
I don't care how he did it. I want to know why he did it. You're worried about me. Why you survived.
I'm sure we can find something I have that you need.
These guys are trained to be ghosts. Let's not waste time chasing after him. Just make him come to us. Find something that's personally important to him and you squeeze.
Tom Cruise just looks the same, doesn't he? Something funny going on there.
This whole operation was a decoy. I can understand you're very upset. You've never seen me very upset.
This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
So there you go. Hope that's got you excited for the N64 game. There we go. That was Ocean's attempt at a Mission Impossible trailer. That message at the end of the movie trailer, which is a bit cheeky. So, I mean, fair play to Acclaim for the Turok trailer, because at least they went all out and just showed constant gameplay footage. This trailer actually did a really good job of getting people, myself included, pumped for Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which is one of the earliest N64 games. I mean, at the time, you gotta bear in mind, first-person shooters were very rare on consoles at this point. At this point, we were talking Doom and Quake on PCs, and that's about it. There wasn't... GoldenEye wasn't out at this point. GoldenEye was the first big console FPS. Well, the one that first kind of transformed the genre. So at this point, the idea of an FPS on consoles was like ridiculous. So you gotta bear that in mind while looking at this. This is pre-GoldenEye, so this is a very, very early console FPS, and they did a good job, except for these platforming bits, which in hindsight were a terrible idea because they didn't have kind of accuracy down yet for jumping. The rest of the game, for a first crack at it, was excellent. Loads of fog, you can see here, was one of the things it was notorious for, and its sequel was the amount of fog in each stage. like there you can see it as you go further away. It was really just to save save on processing, because the kind of levels were so detailed for the time. It can only really render a wee bit like ahead of it. If it tried to render too much, it would have slowed the game down to a crawl, and it was already pretty slow as it was. So yeah, you can see there, just entire bits just draw themselves in as you get within 10 feet of it, and anything else just kind of fades into this mysterious fog in the background. And yeah, it was purely a hardware reason. It wasn't an aesthetic choice. I'm sure given the choice they'd rather have not had fog in it, but there you go, that's what they had to do. It's made you look really short-sighted, because like you can see like every single levels, even underground caves like this had fog in them, which just made no sense at all. But there you go. It was also Silent Hill did the same on the PlayStation. They had loads of foggy areas, and that helped because it helped the game's atmosphere. But yeah, it wasn't. That became like an aesthetic choice by, not by choice, but almost by kind of. It was necessary. But there we go, a bit of Turok. So that's the N64 Magazine video. It's one of my favourite videos. Like I say, I watched it to death, so apologies if there was like occasional kind of glitches and jumpiness in this video. That's just because I played it to death. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. And yeah, please do like and subscribe and all that stuff, and keep an eye on titledhack.com for the next video. Thanks guys, thanks for watching.